Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be back.
All right, so today we're cutting through the noise, like we always try to do, bringing you the most potent insights from, well, a whole stack of sources, all custom tailored for your curiosity.
Mhm.
And today we're embarking on a really extraordinary journey, I think, into one of the most profound and, let's be honest, often most unsettling experiences in spiritual life.
Yeah, definitely unsettling for many.
The dark night of the soul. It's a phrase, many of us have heard, and perhaps if you're anything like me, you've even felt that kind of chilling resonance of its meaning in your own life at some point.
It really resonates, doesn't it, that phrase?
It does. Think about those moments. Maybe in your own spiritual path, which once felt so vibrant, so clear, and then suddenly it just hits a wall.
Yeah, like running into fog.
Exactly. Maybe you've experienced just profound doubt or this pervasive dryness where prayer just feels empty, hollow even.
Or worse.
Or that soul-crushing sense of being utterly abandoned by whatever it was you once believed in so strongly. It's a place, a lot of sincere seekers encounter.
It really is common, surprisingly common.
And our immediate reaction, our human reaction, is often to see it as, well, a personal failure, isn't it?
Absolutely. We think, I must have done something wrong.
We tell ourselves we've somehow strayed or lost our way, or maybe our faith just wasn't strong enough. It feels like a complete spiritual dead end.
Yeah, the end of the road. Hopelessness.
But what if these periods of deep darkness, this feeling of being lost, aren't a spiritual dead end at all? What if instead they are actually a crucial, purifying, maybe even a grace-filled stage of really profound growth?
A stage of growth. That's a different angle.
And what if these moments of feeling utterly abandoned? What if they aren't an absence of the divine, but rather an intense, transformative inflowing of God?
An inflow, that's the core paradox, isn't it?
That's the radical question we're exploring today. We're unpacking this, well, frankly, astonishing idea by introducing you to a truly remarkable figure, Saint John of the Cross.
A giant in mystical theology.
Yeah, a 16th century Spanish mystic, a Carmelite friar whose work, Dark Night of the Soul, it just completely redefined spiritual struggle for centuries after.
It really did, still does.
So this deep dive, we're going to explore his often counterintuitive wisdom, reframing what feels like abandonment into something necessary, a divinely orchestrated process of purification.
Moving from seeing it as negative to seeing it as purposeful.
Exactly. Our mission here in this deep dive is really to illuminate the profound and, yeah, often counterintuitive wisdom of the Dark Night. We're going to extract the most important insights, not just from St. John, but other mystical traditions too, to show you how this painful emptying isn't just suffering for suffering's sake. It's not pointless.
Right, it has a goal.
It's a sacred act that actually makes room for the divine, leading to a deeper, more authentic union with God. It's really not about mere pain. It's about transformative love.
Transformative love born from darkness. It's powerful stuff.
So to guide us through this, well, intricate landscape, we've pulled together a really rich tapestry of wisdom, ancient and modern.
Good. Need that context.
Our primary guide, of course, is St. John of the Cross's Dark Night of the Soul. It's a cornerstone text, really, of Christian mysticism.
Absolutely essential.
But we'll also weave in perspectives from his contemporary, St. Teresa of Avila. Her work, Interior Castle, is just profound.
Yes, they complement each other so well.
And the anonymous author of The Cloud of Unknowing, these Christian mystics offer such invaluable, practical, experiential insight.
They really ground the experience.
And beyond that, we'll draw from, the deep wells of Sufi mystics like Rumi. His poetry on divine love and longing, it just resonates so deeply with this whole process.
That sense of yearning in the darkness.
Exactly. And from Eastern philosophies too, the Dhammapada, the Tao Te Ching, the Bhagavad Gita, they speak to these universal themes of attachment, of self-transcendence.
Seeing the parallels across traditions is always fascinating.
Definitely. And to make sure this ancient wisdom connects with our modern experience, we'll tap into insights from contemporary psychological and spiritual writers, people like C.S. Lewis, Ram Dass, Tara Brach, Michael A. Singer.
Bring it home to today.
Yeah, and even philosophical texts like Theologia Germanica, A Course in Miracles, Conversations with God. It's going to be, we hope, a holistic, accessible, and deeply illuminating look at a truly profound topic.
Sounds like a comprehensive journey. Let's dive in.
All right, so let's begin this journey. Where do we start with defining this dark night?
Well, what's truly fascinating and often misunderstood right off the bat is the term itself, Dark Night of the Soul. It immediately conjures images of despair, right? Absence of void.
Yeah, exactly. Darkness, emptiness, abandonment.
But St. John's core definition, it's actually profoundly different. He describes this dark night not as an absence of God, not as a void,
Yeah.
but quite paradoxically, as an inflowing of God into the soul.
An inflowing. That's unexpected.
It is. He stresses it's a secret divine work, actively purging it from its ignorances and imperfections, habitual, natural, and spiritual.
So it's God doing something, not God leaving.
Precisely. And that redefinition is absolutely critical because it fundamentally shifts our understanding from something negative happening to us, like we're being punished or forgotten.
Which is exactly how it feels.
Right. To something divinely positive and transformative happening within us. It's an active purification by God's presence, not God's absence.
That's such a radical reframing. My mind immediately goes to those times I felt that exact sense of abandonment, that emptiness. It takes a huge leap of faith, doesn't it, to interpret that feeling as God flowing in?
It really does. It goes against our immediate sensory experience.
Can you elaborate a bit more on what he means by this inflowing? How does that work?
Absolutely. He calls this process infused contemplation, or sometimes mystical theology.
Infused contemplation.
Okay. Think of it like this.
Yeah.
Most of our spiritual practices are active, right? We meditate, we pray, we study, we do acts of charity. These are things we do.
Our effort.
Exactly, our effort. But infused contemplation is passive. It's God's wisdom, God's love, flowing into the soul directly, almost like a spiritual download, you could say, without our active effort, or even our full intellectual understanding of how it's happening.
So it's something received, not achieved.
Perfectly put. St. John says God is secretly teaching the soul and instructing it in perfection of love without its doing anything or understanding of what manner is this infused contemplation. It's a profound teaching that really challenges our modern impulse to always be doing, to be in control even in our spiritual lives.
That's hard to accept, letting go of the reins like that.
It is. But he says this divine wisdom, this loving wisdom of God, has striking effects in the soul. Specifically, it's purging and illumining it.
Purging and illumining.
Yeah.
So cleaning out and lighting up?
Kind of, yeah. Preparing it for the union of love with God. And he even points out this is the same loving wisdom that purges and enlightens blessed spirits like angels.
Wow. So it's a celestial level process happening within us.
In a way, yes. It
Yeah.
suggests we're participating in this divine refining process. So rather than being abandoned, the soul is being actively refined by the very essence of divine love itself, being prepared for something far greater than its current state, its current capacity to receive God.
Okay, let's unpack this for a moment then. If this dark night, this challenging period, is actually a divine inflowing, a passive purification, how do we usually get it so wrong? How do we misinterpret our initial spiritual highs and then those subsequent seemingly crushing periods of dryness?
That's a great question.
Because I think for many people, myself included, the spiritual journey starts with this incredible zeal, right? This feeling of undeniable connection, maybe consolations in prayer.
Yeah, the honeymoon phase.
Exactly. And then, poof, it just dries up, feels like the well went dry, and we immediately think, I must have done something terribly wrong.
You've hit on such a crucial point there. C.S. Lewis, actually, in the Screwtape Letters, offers a really astute caution about this very thing.
Oh, interesting. From Screwtape's perspective.
Yes, the demon Screwtape is advising his nephew, Wormwood. Lewis warns, through Screwtape, against the common human belief that those initial spiritual ardors, that intense, joyful feeling of connection, should last forever, or that the current dryness is a permanent state.
So Screwtape wants us to think the good feelings should last forever.
Exactly. Because then, when they inevitably fade, despair sets in. Lewis frames it as an exploitation of the trough in our spiritual life. Screwtape sees these natural fluctuations as opportunities.
So Lewis is saying it's a natural cycle, these ups and downs, but we're easily convinced, maybe by our own minds, or in his analogy, the enemy, that the downswing is a sign of permanent failure.
Precisely. Lewis introduces what he calls the law of undulation.
The law of undulation.
Yeah. It describes these natural, almost rhythmic cycles of fervor and desolation, of spiritual highs and lows that are just inherent to the human condition, especially in relation to the spiritual life. He suggests the enemy's strategy, Screwtape's strategy, is to prevent the human soul, the patient, as he calls them, from even suspecting this law exists.
Why? What's the advantage for the enemy if we don't know about this cycle?
Because if you don't understand that these highs and lows are natural, that they're part of a larger divine design, then a period of dryness, a trough, can be just devastatingly exploited by despair.
Makes sense. You'd think everything is lost.
Right. You'd believe all spiritual blessing is over for you, as St. John also observed. Or, Lewis notes, on the flip side, the trough can lead to a temptation to seek a kind of bland moderation in all things, as a way to avoid the discomfort of the lows and the intensity of the highs.
Ah, like trying to flatline emotionally and spiritually.
Exactly.
Mm.
Which Lewis Riley notes, through Screwtape, is as good for us the demons as no religion at all, and more amusing. It completely bypasses the deep work, the transformation that can happen in those troughs, in that darkness.
That's such a powerful observation from Lewis, and it really highlights why St. John's teaching is so vital, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It provides the antidote to this very exploitation Lewis describes. St. John reveals the purpose behind the dryness, the meaning within the undulation. He gives us a framework to understand these difficult periods, not as a sign we failed, but as part of a deeper divine plan unfolding.
It reframes the entire experience.
It really does. It's about navigating that labyrinth, the experience of darkness and doubt, but with new eyes, with a map that shows it leads somewhere meaningful.
Indeed. And make no mistake, this journey through the dark night, especially that initial phase St. John calls the night of sense, it's not for the faint of heart.
The night of sense, that's the first part.
Yes, the purification that primarily affects our sensory appetites and our reliance on spiritual consolations. Those good feelings in prayer, for example. Souls entering this stage endure great trials.
And it's more than just feeling dry in prayer.
Oh, much more. The suffering isn't merely from aridities, which is the technical term for that lack of feeling or devotion. It's a much deeper suffering that stems from a profound fear which they have of being lost on the road.
Fear of being lost, spiritually adrift.
Exactly. They genuinely believe that all spiritual blessing is over for them and that God has abandoned them. Why? Because they find absolutely no help, no pleasure, no connection in the spiritual practices that once brought them so much joy and consolation. Everything just feels dead.
And that must be terrifying.
Utterly. And this is so crucial, especially for anyone listening who identifies as a learner on the spiritual path. Understanding that these feelings are not unique failures. They are not a sign that you personally have messed up. They are part of a recognized, profound, and often bewildering spiritual process.
Documented for centuries.
Documented for centuries by mystics like St. John. It's almost a universal experience for those who are called to the path of deep transformation. You're not alone in feeling this way.
That's incredibly validating to hear. So what do people typically do when they hit this wall? When their usual spiritual routines, their prayers, their meditations just stop working? Our human impulse is usually to try harder, right? To go back to what worked before.
Precisely. That's the immediate reaction. St. John observes that when individuals find themselves in this arid state, they often grow weary, naturally, and then they try to concentrate their faculties with some degree of pleasure upon some object of meditation, just as they have been accustomed to do.
Doubling down on the old methods.
Exactly. They exert mental effort, trying to conjure up feelings of devotion or maybe intellectual understanding, trying to make the connection happen like it used to.
And does it work?
Well, the irony is, St. John notes, this effort is often met with great inward repugnance and unwillingness on the part of their soul.
Repugnance. The soul itself resists.
Yes. Because the soul at this stage actually prefers quietness and ease over that active, effortful, intellectual work of meditation that it used to engage in. It's like the soul instinctively knows that path is closed. It abandons its old pursuits because they no longer yield fruit.
Okay.
But it also gains no profit from new efforts driven by its own spirit, by its own will, because the nature of the spiritual work God is doing in it has fundamentally changed.
So they're essentially trying to force a previous experience that no longer applies, using tools and methods that are no longer effective for this new stage of the journey.
You've got it.
It sounds like St. John is telling us to stop trying to force the spiritual equivalent of a square peg into a round hole. And gosh, how many times have we all done that in life generally, just trying to make something work long after its season has clearly passed?
It's a perfect analogy. And St. John uses a vivid one himself.
Yeah.
He says people trying this are like to one who abandons what he has done in order to do it over again.
Pointless repetition.
Or to one who leaves a city only to re-enter it. Or to one who is hunting and lets his prey go in order to hunt it once more.
Chasing your own tail, basically.
Essentially, yes. He concludes this whole approach is useless here, meaning the soul will gain nothing further by conducting itself in this way. It's a profound recognition that the path has shifted, the landscape has changed, and the old maps, the old methods, they just don't serve anymore.
Wow.
The soul is being called into a completely new mode of being, one where that active striving is gradually replaced by a kind of passive receptivity, which is incredibly counterintuitive and deeply challenging for most of us, especially in our action-oriented cultures.
It really is. Letting go feels like giving up.
And what's fascinating here, maybe even a bit daunting, is the sheer intensity of this dark night experience, particularly that feeling of divine abandonment and desolation. It's so profound that St. John has to reach for some of the most visceral depictions of suffering in Scripture just to describe it adequately.
But like what examples does he use?
He cites Job's lament. Remember Job, sitting in ashes, everything taken from it.
Yeah, the ultimate story of suffering.
St. John quotes Job saying, "He hath assailed me as a strong giant. I have sewed sackcloth upon my skin and have covered my flesh with ashes. My face has become swollen with weeping and my eyes are blinded."
Wow. That's incredibly physical, visceral suffering, not just mental anguish.
Exactly. This isn't just spiritual discomfort or intellectual doubt. St. John is pointing to a felt, almost physical torment, a profound sense of loss and grief so deep that it can manifest in physical anguish, in weeping, and the outward signs of utter mourning.
Those images are incredibly powerful. It really drives home that this isn't just a bad mood or a spiritual slump. It's an all-consuming experience of deep suffering.
Absolutely. And he doesn't stop there. Even more extensively, he employs Jeremiah's words from the Book of Lamentations. This paints a picture of utter desolation that he felt deeply resonated with the soul lost in the dark night.
What does Jeremiah say?
It's intense, he quotes. "I am the man that see my poverty in the rod of his indignation. He hath threatened me and brought me into darkness and not into light."
Brought into darkness,
Yeah.
not light. That captures it.
And it goes on. "So far hath he turned against me and hath converted his hand upon me all the day. My skin and my flesh hath he made old. He hath broken my bones. He hath made a fence around me and compassed me with gall and trial. He hath set me in dark places as those that are dead forever."
Broken bones, fenced in, gall, bitterness. This is brutal imagery.
It really is. "He hath filled me with bitterness and hath made me drunken with wormwood." These passages, St. John uses them not merely as illustrations. They highlight the feeling of complete desolation, the sense of experiencing divine wrath, the physical and spiritual torment that can accompany this deep purification.
It sounds like a complete internal shattering.
That's a good way to put it. The imagery of broken bones, gall, wormwood, it communicates that sense of being utterly trapped, poisoned by bitterness, internally shattered. It validates the overwhelming, seemingly insurmountable nature of this experience for anyone going through it.
It tells you you're not crazy for feeling this devastated.
Exactly. It lets them know that their suffering is recognized, it's been articulated, it's part of the deepest spiritual traditions. It's truly a divine forge, as you might say, burning away everything that is not essential, everything that is not God.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting and frankly just so counterintuitive. Despite all that intense pain, all that suffering, despite the feeling of utter abandonment that St. John describes so vividly using Job and Jeremiah, he says the dark night actually carries an excellent benefit.
The paradox deepens.
It sounds almost contradictory, doesn't it? How can such profound suffering described in those terms possibly lead to a benefit, let alone an excellent one?
It does sound paradoxical from our usual perspective, but St. John explains that through this very process, this intense purification, God will enlighten the soul, giving it knowledge.
Knowledge through suffering.
Yes, but a specific kind of knowledge, not only of its lowliness and wretchedness, so a deep, humbling self-knowledge, but likewise of the greatness and excellence of God.
So knowledge of self and knowledge of God revealed through the darkness.
Exactly. The suffering isn't arbitrary, it's instrumental. It's a catalyst for ushering in a new form of illumination, a deeper, more accurate, more experiential knowledge of both our own limitations and the boundless reality of the divine.
And this is a knowledge you couldn't get otherwise, not through study or good feelings.
St. John argues no. It simply couldn't be gained through intellectual striving alone, or in those pleasant, consoling stages of early spiritual life where everything feels good. The comfort itself can sometimes obscure this deeper reality.
So the pain itself is a tool, a harsh but effective teacher, stripping away illusions.
Precisely. The dark night, he says, quenches the desires and pleasures and attachments of sense, all those things we naturally cling to. And this quenching, this letting go, in turn cleanses and frees the understanding that it may understand the truth.
It clears the decks, so to speak.
It does. And then St. John makes a really powerful, almost shocking point. He says, pleasure of sense and desire, even though it would be for spiritual things, darkens and obstructs the spirit.
Wait, even the pleasure of spiritual things, like good feelings and prayer.
Yes, even seeking spiritual consolations or positive experiences for their own sake, for the feeling they give us, can become a subtle attachment, a way we try to control or possess the spiritual life, which ultimately darkens and obstructs the deeper work of the Spirit.
That's challenging. We naturally seek those good feelings.
We do. But conversely, he says, straightness and aridity of sense enlightens and quickens the understanding. It's this inverse relationship. The discomfort, the stripping away of sensory and spiritual attachments leads directly to clarity, to a quickening of spiritual insight.
So less pleasure equals more light.
In this specific context of purification, yes. This whole process prepares an empty and disencumbered soul, a soul freed from its usual clutter and attachments to be instructed supernaturally by God in his divine wisdom.
Instructed directly by God.
Yes, receiving a profound, direct knowledge God gave not in those first sweetnesses and joys. It's a deeper wisdom that transcends intellectual comprehension or emotional satisfaction. As the prophet Isaiah says, and St. John quotes, "Thy light shall shine in the darkness." The apparent loss, the darkness, is actually the necessary preparation for a greater, more profound reception of divine truth.
The emptying makes space for the filling.
Perfectly said. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this profound purification, this emptying of the self, it aligns so well with mystical insights across many different traditions, especially regarding the dissolution or transcendence of the ego.
How so? Give me an example.
Well, take Theologia Germanica, that anonymous but deeply influential 14th century mystical text. It states it so clearly, so starkly even. The more the self, the I, the me, the mind, that is self-seeking and selfishness, abate in a man, the more doth God's eye, that is God himself, increase in him.
Wow. The less me, the more God. It's like an equation.
It is presented almost like that. And
Yeah.
it goes further, asserting that all self-will is sin, and there is no sin but what springeth therefrom.
Okay, that word sin can be loaded, but defining it purely as self-will, as separation from the divine flow, that reframes it entirely, doesn't it?
It does. It moves it from a purely moralistic category to a spiritual or ontological one. It's not about self-negation in a destructive, self-hating way. That's not the point. It's about a profound self-transcendence.
Going beyond the limited self?
Yes, an emptying of that limited, conditional, often fearful self to make room for the boundless, unconditional divine life to flow through.
That reminds me, Michael Singer in The Untethered Soul, he talks about something similar, doesn't he? About transcending the part of you that is not okay and needs protection. That fearful, defended self.
Absolutely. Singer's work resonates perfectly here. He speaks of becoming the one inside that notices the voice talking, that constant mental chatter, the commentary.
The observer.
Yes, the silent observer, which he suggests serves as a doorway to true spiritual awakening. This idea implies that the spiritual path, as described by St. John in the Dark Night, absolutely necessitates the collapse, or at least the profound relativizing, of this self-constructed identity, the ego.
It has to crumble for something else to emerge.
Precisely. To allow for a divine indwelling, for God's presence to become the operating principle. This is strikingly similar to concepts like fana in Sufism.
Fana.
Yes, as explored by mystics like Rumi. It means annihilation or extinguishment, where the individual self, the nafs, is extinguished or dissolved to merge with the divine, becoming one with the beloved.
That sounds intense. Annihilation.
It does. But Rumi's poetry often speaks of this dissolution not as a loss, but as a gain, a transformation into something vaster. He has lines like, "I died as a mineral and became a plant. I died as a plant and became an animal. I died as an animal and became a man. Why should I fear? When was I less by dying?"
Ah, seeing it as evolution, not destruction.
Exactly. It echoes this profound truth that losing the limited self is actually gaining a vaster, truer existence. And you see parallels in Buddhism, too, with the concept of anatta, or non-self.
Non-self, meaning there is no permanent self.
Essentially, yes. It's the teaching that there is no permanent, unchanging, independent soul or self. Our clinging to the illusion of a separate, solid self is seen as the fundamental root of suffering, of dukkha. So the dissolution of this clinging, this realization of non-self, is key to liberation.
So across these traditions, Christian mysticism, Sufism, Buddhism, there's this recurring theme. The personal possessive I must be seen through for the divine, the true reality, the I am, to emerge.
Beautifully summarized. It's a core insight in the mystical path worldwide.
And this idea of shedding self-possession, moving beyond me and mine, especially in the spiritual realm, that also reminds me of something from conversations with God about highly evolved beings. Did that resonate for you, too?
It absolutely did. Conversations with God introduces this idea that These highly evolved beings live by a fundamental principle. We are all one.
The sense of unity.
Yes, and flowing from that, their understanding of personal ownership is completely transformed. It's experienced as stewardship, not possession.
Stewardship versus possession. Can you unpack that difference?
Well, possession implies, this is mine, I control it, I have rights over it. Stewardship implies this is entrusted to my care, I'm responsible for it, but it doesn't ultimately belong to me. They don't grasp or cling. The book says they caress rather than own things.
That's a lovely image. Caressing reality instead of grabbing it.
Isn't it?
Mm.
And this provides a direct, powerful parallel to the Dark Knight's emptying process. The soul is being stripped not just of its sensory comforts, its good feelings,
Right.
but also of its spiritual possessions. Things like its past consolations, its perceived merits or virtues, even its very sense of self-agency in the spiritual journey, my progress, my insights, my holiness.
Letting go of the spiritual ego, too.
Exactly. It moves from owning its spiritual progress to becoming a humble steward of divine grace. It's a profound shift from my spirituality to simply God's work happening in me.
That letting go of ownership feels very Taoist as well.
It resonates deeply with the Tao Te Ching, doesn't it? That text says, Tao nourishes and protects all creatures, yet does not claim lordship over them. So we class it with the most humble.
The ultimate power is humble, non-possessive.
Precisely. And it also notes the sage is the same way. He does not claim greatness over anything. He's not even aware of his own greatness. This profound humility, this non-possessiveness, it aligns perfectly with the ultimate outcome, the fruit of the Dark Night.
What is that outcome?
A state where the individual self is so emptied, so surrendered, that it naturally reflects the divine in its complete lack of self-importance or claim over anything. It's that shift we talked about, from active doing, trying to achieve or possess, to passive receptive being, becoming an open vessel for divine will rather than an agent of personal will.
Okay, so it's a path of emptying, of letting go, of facing deep darkness. It sounds incredibly challenging, yet you mentioned St. John talks about security. After all that talk of desolation and doubt, is there truly security in that darkness? It seems so counterintuitive to find safety when everything feels like it's falling apart.
It is deeply counterintuitive, isn't it? But yes, St. John assures us that the soul, when it's truly undergoing this divine purification, journeys securely in darkness.
Securely in darkness? How?
He describes these obscure and afflictive experiences, the dryness, the temptations, the feeling of abandonment, not as a sign of being lost, but paradoxically as waters.
Waters, like nourishment.
Yes. He says, though dark, they are nonetheless waters, meaning they are actually refreshing and fortifying the soul in what is most needful, even if it doesn't feel that way at all. It's in this very obscurity, this stripping away of all the visible consolations and props, that the soul develops something incredibly precious.
What's that?
A genuine determination and an effectual desire to do naught which it understands to be an offense to God, and to omit to do naught that seems to be for his service.
So the focus becomes purely, radically on God's will and pleasure, not personal gain or comfort, precisely because all those comforts and personal agendas have been stripped away.
You've got it. It's like having nothing left to lose, or perhaps better, nothing left to seek for oneself. So all that remains is this purified intention towards God alone.
That sounds incredibly free in a strange way.
It is a kind of freedom. St. John says this dark love, this love operating in the absence of feeling, cleaves to the soul, causing it a most watchful care and an inward solicitude concerning that which it must do or must not do for his sake in order to please him.
A watchful care, like a heightened awareness.
Yes, a sensitivity to divine will. All the soul's desires, energies, and faculties become recollected from all things else, pulled away from worldly distractions, or even subtle spiritual self-seeking, and its effort and strength are employed in pleasing its God alone.
Wow. That is the transformative power, isn't it? It frees the soul from all those other attachments, all these self-serving motives, however subtle.
Leading it forth, as he says poetically, from itself and from all created things to the sweet and delectable union of love of God in darkness and secure. The security comes precisely from abandoning reliance on anything external or internal that is not God himself. Trust shifts entirely to the divine ground.
But surely navigating this kind of darkness, this intense process, it can't be easy to do alone. Does St. John or maybe others talk about the need for guidance?
Oh, absolutely. And this journey isn't meant to be undertaken entirely alone or without wise guidance. St. Teresa of Avila, St. John's great contemporary and fellow Carmelite mystic provides a really crucial complement to his work here, especially in her book Interior Castle.
Teresa. What does she emphasize?
She strongly emphasizes the indispensable role of ready obedience. Not blind obedience, but a humble willingness to listen, and the vital importance of finding someone to whom they could go. Essentially, a skilled spiritual director.
A spiritual director, like a guide.
Exactly. This guidance isn't meant to be a crutch or to take away personal responsibility, but it serves as a vital protection, a source of discernment for the soul embarking on such an intense, potentially confusing, and perilous inner journey.
Why is that guidance so crucial, especially when you're in this deeply personal internal space where it might even feel like God has abandoned you? Wouldn't the natural tendency be just to retreat into yourself, to isolate?
Precisely. The temptation to retreat, to get lost in one's own interpretations or despair, is immense. Guidance is crucial, St. Teresa says, for learning to know ourselves more objectively. And also, importantly, for seeing that things which we thought impossible, like surviving this darkness or reaching deeper union, are possible to others.
Ah, getting perspective. Seeing you're not the only one.
Yes, and gaining hope from others' experience. This external experience perspective from a spiritual director acts as a vital protection against the soul retreating to earlier, less mature spiritual stages, the mansions, as she calls them, or worse, succumbing to subtle temptations or despair.
Because you're vulnerable at that point.
Extremely vulnerable. St. Teresa notes that in these intense stages, the soul's own fortitude is not built upon solid ground like that of souls who are already practiced in suffering. You're in new territory. Without a guide, the temptation to abandon the path altogether, to misinterpret the intense suffering as divine punishment, or to succumb to the devil's deceptions, as she would frame it, could be overwhelming. It could lead to greater spiritual harm.
So the director is like an experienced mountaineer, guiding you through unknown, potentially dangerous terrain, helping you read the signs correctly.
That's an excellent analogy. They help the soul discern what is truly God's purifying work versus what might be one's own overwrought imagination, psychological issues, or subtle forms of lingering self-will. They provide stability and clarity in the fog.
So what does this all mean then for our active approach to the divine during this period? If the old ways don't work and we're supposed to be passive, it sounds like the Dark Night calls for a really radical departure from how we normally try to connect with God, right? Whether that's through intense intellectual study or seeking specific sensory or emotional experiences.
It absolutely does call for a radical shift. We're being told our old methods, the ones that rely on our own efforts to feel or understand, simply won't work anymore. They've served their purpose, and now God is drawing the soul in a different way.
And how do we navigate that if we can't think our way through or feel our way through?
Well, the anonymous medieval classic, The Cloud of Unknowing, offers profound guidance here. It's particularly relevant, I think, for the later stages of the Dark Night, the Night of the Spirit, where the purification goes even deeper than the senses.
The Cloud of Unknowing. What does it advise?
It gives a very stark instruction. Of God himself can no man think.
Can no man think, meaning God is beyond all our concepts.
Completely beyond. Therefore, the author says, one must leave all that thing that I can think and choose to my love that thing that I cannot think.
Leave everything I can think and choose to love what I cannot think. Wow. That's a mind bender. How do you even begin to do that?
It sounds almost impossible, doesn't it? Like trying to grasp smoke, as you said earlier. What does it look like in practice for someone experiencing this profound unknowing, this sense that God is utterly beyond comprehension? It's described not as thinking, but as a sustained act of loving will, a directed intention that transcends the intellect. The text tells us to smite upon that thick cloud of unknowing with a sharp dart of longing love, and go not thence for thing that befalleth.
A sharp dart of longing love, smiting the cloud. What does that mean practically?
It means holding a deep, simple, loving intention towards God, a pure desire for union, even when God feels utterly absent, totally unknowable, perhaps even terrifying in that unknowability. It's not about doing anything specific with your mind, not forming images, not reciting complex prayers, not analyzing feelings. It's about this persistent, naked intent of the will reaching out into the darkness, fueled only by love or the desire for love.
Like continually knocking at a door you can't see, with only the longing in your heart to keep you going.
That's a beautiful way to put it, yes. And the text explicitly warns against trying to use our outward bodily wits, our senses of sight, hearing, smell, taste, or feeling, to perceive spiritual things directly during this time.
Why not? Don't people have spiritual visions or feelings?
They might. But the Cloud author warns that at this stage of deep union, relying on or seeking those is a distraction, even a deception. It states flatly that God nor ghostly spiritual things, none of these qualities or quantities. God is not something you can sense or quantify. Those who try to perceive the ultimate spiritual reality this way are deceived.
So it means letting go of even cherished spiritual experiences if they're still tied to sensory or intellectual gratification.
Yes, it's a call to move beyond even those, focusing instead on this pure, simple, contentless act of love towards the incomprehensible divine. It's a profound surrender to pure love in the void, trusting that the love itself is the connection, even when nothing else is felt or understood.
That's a very high bar, a radical letting go.
It is. It's the heart of mystical prayer in this tradition. And we connect this back to the bigger picture again, these core principles we're seeing in St. John in the Cloud especially, the ego dissolution, the letting go, the radical acceptance of suffering and unknowing. They aren't exclusive to Christian mysticism at all. They resonate so deeply across diverse spiritual traditions.
You mentioned parallels earlier. Can you give another example?
Sure. Consider Siddhartha's journey, as depicted in Hermann Hesse's famous novel. After years of worldly life, feeling empty, he rejects formal teachings to learn from myself. He hits a point of deep sadness, a feeling of being worthless. That sounds a lot like the desolation and self-doubt of the dark night, doesn't it?
It really does, that sense of inner poverty.
And then his later experience, after much searching, of deep listening to the river, hearing 100 voices, 1,000 voices, all at once, the sound of unity. And then his friend Vasudeva's departure into the oneness. These beautifully illustrate that merging of the individual identity into a greater universal unity, much like the self-emptying St. John describes. The separate self dissolves into the universal flow.
So it suggests this process of ego dissolution, of finding unity beyond the self. It's a truly universal human potential, regardless of the specific cultural or religious wrapping it comes in.
Precisely. And look at Buddhism again. The Dhammapada speaks of achieving the path of purity, liberation, when, through wisdom, one perceives, all dhammas are without self.
All dhammas, meaning all things, all phenomena.
Yes, all things physical, mental, spiritual experiences, everything. Perceiving that all things are without self means recognizing the impermanent, illusory nature of a separate, unchanging self that grasps and clings to these phenomena. The text further states, quite simply, detachment is the best of dhammas.
Detachment, letting go of that clinging.
Exactly. This core Buddhist teaching directly mirrors the emptying of self-will and the detachment from personal identity and experiences that is so central to the dark night. It's about letting go of our fixed ideas about who we are, what we possess, what we should feel, freeing us from the suffering that inevitably arises from clinging to those illusions.
And what about navigating the intense pain, the suffering that seems inherent in this process of letting go and dissolution? Any modern takes on that?
Yes, absolutely. Tara Bragg's work on radical acceptance offers a really powerful, practical, modern perspective that applies directly here.
Radical acceptance. What's the core idea?
She advocates for us to actively soften any reaction against the pain, allowing the fist of resistance to unclench and open. Instead of fighting, judging, or trying to escape the difficult sensations and emotions that arise during a dark night, the fear, the grief, the emptiness, we're invited to meet them with an open, allowing heart.
So not trying to fix it, but just be with it differently.
Exactly. By connecting with what she calls open and spacious awareness, we can learn to be present with unpleasant sensations, allowing them to unfold naturally without being completely consumed or identified with them. It's about holding the pain with awareness.
And that helps how?
This compassion for ourselves, releasing the self-judgment, the self-hatred for our perceived failures or weaknesses, leads, paradoxically, to clarity and balance. It's akin to facing the dark night suffering with a different internal stance, one of mindful, non-resistant presence rather than frantic struggle or self-condemnation.
That sounds like Ram Dass's teachings too, doesn't it? Be here now.
Very much so. Ram Dass taught so profoundly about being here now and cultivating loving awareness, which means developing that open, non-judgmental presence with whatever arises in our experience, including profound spiritual desolation or intense emotional pain. His teaching, the quieter you become, the more you can hear, resonates so strongly with the passive receptivity St. John advocates and the need to stop fighting the experience.
So it's really about changing our fundamental relationship to the pain itself, cultivating an internal stance of acceptance, of mindful presence, rather than constantly trying to make the darkness go away or judging ourselves mercilessly for experiencing it.
That's a huge part of navigating it wisely, yes.
And what about the idea of consciousness itself in all of this? You mentioned the observer earlier, the part that notices. How does that fit in?
The Untethered Soul, Michael Singer's book, offers a really profound insight here. He highlights that there's a part of your being that can actually abstract from your own melodrama.
Abstract from the melodrama, step back from the story.
Yes. This one who's in there noticing these things, noticing your thoughts, your emotions, your physical sensations, the whole internal drama is described as the seat of consciousness. And recognizing this seat, this awareness, is what allows one to ultimately overcome personal disturbances.
So the idea is that no matter what thoughts or emotions are swirling around, no matter how intense the spiritual dryness or the despair feels, there's a part of us that's just watching, a silent witness.
Exactly. Singer emphasizes that this consciousness that is aware of these objects, the thoughts, feelings, sensations, remains the same, even as those objects constantly change. It's the unchanging you, the pure awareness, observing the ever-changing personality, the drama of the mind, the inevitable ups and downs of the spiritual journey.
That's a potentially stabilizing thought in the midst of chaos.
Immensely stabilizing. And the Bhagavad Gita provides a beautiful, classic analogy for this very idea.
What's the analogy?
It says, as the sun is situated in one place, but is illuminating the whole universe, so a small particle of spirit soul is illuminating the whole body by consciousness. Consciousness, in this view, is like the light of the soul, permeating everything. It's the proof of the presence of the soul.
The light that makes experience possible.
Yes. And this reinforces the idea of an inherent, observing spiritual essence that is distinct from and unaffected by our ever-shifting psychological and emotional states. The key insight is to identify with this immutable observer, this pure awareness, rather than getting completely lost in the changing experiences, the content of the mind.
Because you are not the darkness, you are the awareness experiencing the darkness.
Precisely. You are the light that perceives the shadow. Recognizing this is a profound key to navigating the dark night because it reminds you that your essential being is not defined or destroyed by the temporary state of darkness.
This brings us back to a crucial point you touched on earlier, the power of interpretation, especially during these times of intense spiritual darkness.
Yes, interpretation is key. A Course in Miracles emphasizes this very strongly. It states that we do not respond to anything directly, but to your interpretation of it.
We react to our story about the thing, not the thing itself.
Exactly. Therefore, the Course says, to interpret error is to give it power. And having done this, you will overlook truth.
Interpret error, like interpreting the dark night as abandonment.
Precisely. That perspective, that interpretation, is vital in the dark night. If one interprets the spiritual dryness, the suffering, the silence of God as divine abandonment or as proof of personal failure, that interpretation itself empowers the error. It gives it reality in your experience and leads to immense, unnecessary suffering. And in doing so, you overlook the potential truth of the situation.
So our perception or chosen interpretation literally shapes our reality in these moments. It can amplify the pain or potentially alleviate it based purely on the story we tell ourselves about what's happening.
In a very significant way, yes. It dictates the meaning we derive from the experience.
How do we actively shift that interpretation, though? When you're deep in the throes of that profound suffering, feeling abandoned, how do you consciously choose a different story? It feels like the feeling is the reality.
It's incredibly difficult, no doubt.
Yeah.
But the active shift comes from conscious intention, from choosing to align with a higher perspective, even when, and this is crucial, even when your feelings don't match that perspective at all. It's an act of faith, really.
Faith in the process itself.
Faith in the process, faith in the wisdom teachings like St. John's. Choosing deliberately to interpret these difficult experiences as a purification process, as St. John does, instead of seeing them as divine punishment or personal failure, aligns you with a deeper truth and significantly reduces the self-inflicted portion of the suffering. It doesn't deny the real pain, but it reframes its meaning and its ultimate purpose.
And that reframing resonates with other sources too.
Absolutely. Think about conversations with God's assertion that God doesn't judge things as good or bad. These are human constructs, human interpretations. Instead, it offers that radical view we mentioned. You are a creative being made in the image and likeness of God. You may have whatever you choose.
Meaning we choose our experience through our perspective.
Largely, yes. Our experience is profoundly shaped by our chosen perspective. So making that conscious shift during the dark night from interpreting it as abandonment to interpreting it as purification isn't just wishful thinking. It's a powerful, indeed, perhaps a divine act of conscious choice. It changes not just how we feel about the journey, but what the journey itself means for our soul's ultimate becoming.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the process, the intense purification, the emptying, the letting go of the self, the suffering, the need for guidance, the shift in perspective. But what is it all for? What's the ultimate goal, the destination of this incredibly arduous journey through the dark night? It can't just be suffering for suffering's sake, can it?
You're absolutely right. It's definitely not suffering for its own sake. That would be pointless, even cruel. The ultimate goal, the whole purpose, according to St. John of the Cross, is the soul's departure from itself and from all created things. That emptying we discussed to the sweet and delectable union of love of God in darkness and secure.
The sweet and delectable union, that's the destination.
That is the destination. That profound, intimate, sweet, and delectable union is what justifies the entire painful process. It's not just about reaching an end to the suffering, but about entering into a completely different, deeper, more authentic reality. A state of profound intimacy and oneness with the divine that was simply unattainable while the soul was still cluttered with its old attachments and self-definitions.
So the darkness is the necessary passage to an incomprehensible light, an unimaginable intimacy.
That's exactly how the mystics describe it. The darkness prepares the capacity for the light.
And how is that union described? Does it feel like a sudden, overwhelming event? Or is it more like a gradual, subtle deepening of connection? How do they talk about it?
That's a great question. Saint Teresa of Avila, again in her Interior Castle, provides a beautiful description of it as a progressive union. It's not always a sudden lightning strike. She often likens the later stages to a spiritual betrothal and then even a spiritual marriage.
Betrothal and marriage, like stages of intimacy.
Exactly. In the betrothal stage, the soul and the spouse God meet more profoundly, and the soul learns to appreciate each other better. It's an unfolding relationship, a deepening intimacy. The soul becomes, she says, so fired with love that for her part she does her utmost not to thwart this divine betrothal, meaning it actively cooperates with grace, wanting only this union.
So there's a desire, a drawing towards it.
An intense desire, and she adds that in a secret way, the soul sees who this spouse is that she is to take. It's not a mere intellectual understanding of God anymore. It's an intimate experiential knowing, a recognition, a foretaste of the final merging of wills and being.
Where the limited self merges with the boundless divine.
Yes, in a relationship of pure, consuming, mutual love. It's the culmination of everything the dark night and its stripping away prepares the soul for. It creates the capacity for that total union.
And in this ultimate state, this union, does our understanding of God itself change? Become paradoxical, maybe?
Yes, absolutely. In this ultimate union, we begin to experientially grasp, or perhaps better, embrace, what Conversations with God refers to as the divine dichotomy.
The divine dichotomy.
Oh.
Okay, that sounds like a complex paradox. What is it?
It is, but it's crucial for trying to articulate the nature of ultimate reality, which transcends our normal logic. The text posits that God is everything I create, therefore I am, in a sense, what I am not. And simultaneously, I am what I am, and I am what I am not.
Whoa, okay, break that down. God is everything created, so God is also what God is not, and God is what God is and is what God is not. That sounds contradictory.
It completely breaks our linear either thinking, doesn't it? But what it points to, mystically, is that God is both the totality of all existence, the isness of everything, the manifest universe, and also the nothingness, the pure potentiality, the unmanifest void from which all creation emerges and into which it ultimately dissolves. It's the ultimate unity of existence and non-existence, of form and formlessness, fullness and emptiness.
So the dark night, by stripping away our limited perceptions, our clinging to form, our dualistic thinking, actually helps us become capable of experiencing this boundless reality where God is somehow both everything and nothing, all at once.
Exactly. This profound mystery, which seems utterly contradictory to the rational mind, is partially revealed, or at least apprehended, in the dark night's process of emptying. By having our limited sense of self, our attachments to specific forms or concepts, and our ingrained dualistic perceptions stripped away, the soul becomes capable of experiencing or abiding in this boundless, all-encompassing divine reality.
The individual self merges into everything and nothing.
Yes, into the divine ground, in a way that truly defies human logic. It becomes one with the source of both being and non-being. It's an experience of unity that transcends all our usual human categories and brings a sense of completion of homecoming that is beyond intellectual comprehension.
So after going through all of this, the darkness, the emptying, the union, what are the practical fruits of this profound transformation? What does a soul that has navigated this dark night actually look like, act like on the other side? What does it truly gain in terms of lived experience?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? What difference does it make? Well, Theologia Germanica offers a beautiful description. It says, a truly godlike man, someone who has undergone this deep purification and union, possesses a pure and unmixed love.
Pure and unmixed love. How does that manifest?
It's full of kindness, extending impartially to all people and all things without judgment or preference based on external factors. Such a person has found a content and a quietness deep in their heart. They desire nothing more, nothing less than what is. They've found perfect peace in simply resting in the divine will.
Content and quietness. That sounds like deep peace.
It is their only complaint, the text says humorously, is of sin, which, as we discussed, they understand simply as self-will, as anything that creates a sense of separation from the divine flow. So this profound inner peace, this capacity for universal love, this complete contentment regardless of circumstances, these are described as the direct, undeniable consequences, the fruits of the purification process. It's a state of deep spiritual maturity and integration. And William James, the great psychologist and philosopher of religion, observed something similar in his study, The Varieties of Religious Experience. He speaks of these achieved faith states, often born from conversion or mystical experience, as a sthenic affection.
Sthenic, meaning strong, vigorous.
Yes, an excitement of the cheerful, expansive, dynamogenic order. He notes that this state freshens our vital powers, actively overcomes melancholy and depression, and imparts incredible endurance, zest, and meaning to life. So it's not just passive peace, but an active joy and vitality. Absolutely. He observes that converts, people who've had these transformative experiences, often report sweet peace combined with an almost ecstasy of joy. It's not a muted, resigned state, but an active, invigorating force that completely transforms their perception of and engagement with daily life.
It sounds like finding an unshakable, profound happiness that isn't dependent on anything external changing. It comes from within.
Indeed. And Michael Singer, back in The Untethered Soul, offers a really bold and inspiring conclusion that perfectly encapsulates this ultimate outcome. He puts it very directly.
What does he say?
He says, if you decide that you're going to be happy from now on for the rest of your life, you will not only be happy, you'll become enlightened. Unconditional happiness is the highest technique there is.
Wow. Unconditional happiness as enlightenment itself.
That's his assertion. This state, which he argues is achieved through the kind of surrender and purification we've been discussing, letting go of the inner thorns, is described not just as a nice feeling or a philosophy, but as a direct experience of coming toward God, of directly reflecting God's own boundless, joyful nature. It is the ultimate freedom found in total surrender, non-resistance, and unconditional love, a lasting spiritual awakening that transcends all the prior suffering and darkness.
What a journey. We've really covered a lot of ground today, traveling through this challenging yet ultimately profoundly transformative landscape of the dark night of the soul.
It's deep territory.
It really is. We've seen how St. John the Cross, but also supported by insights from other wisdom traditions, East and West, ancient and modern, presents this experience of spiritual dryness, of darkness, not as abandonment by God, not as failure.
Which is our first instinct.
Right, but instead as a necessary divine act of purification, an emptying of the senses, an emptying of the spirit, all to create space for an incomprehensible, unifying love.
Making room for grace.
Exactly. And this process, as we've explored in detail, it demands radical surrender, doesn't it? Unwavering trust in this unseen divine work, even when all evidence seems contrary. And often, as St. Teresa emphasized, the humble guidance of a wise teacher.
That support is crucial.
Leading ultimately, hopefully, to that profound, unconditional union and an unshakable inner peace, that contentment, that joy, which is truly, as the mystics say, a taste of the divine itself.
The food of the journey.
And this, I think, raises an important, maybe even a provocative question for you, the listener, to carry forward from our conversation today.
Mhm.
If the darkness you've encountered, or perhaps are encountering on your own path, those times of profound doubt, maybe emotional dryness, that feeling of being cut off or abandoned, if that's not a sign of failure, but could actually be a purposeful, even a grace-filled invitation.
An invitation.
Yes, an invitation to release attachments, to let go of old ways of being, and to deepen your connection to the divine in a way you couldn't before. Then what dark night, what area of struggle or perceived emptiness might you be resisting in your life right now?
That's a searching question.
What moments of inner struggle, what perceived endings or losses could actually be the hidden precursor, the necessary preparation for a more profound, more authentic spiritual awakening than you could ever possibly imagine? We invite you to maybe just ponder that thought and perhaps reframe your own journey, your own dark nights with new eyes.
A powerful thought to end on.